You know what to me was the most interesting part of last year compared to this year is that the 49ers, think about this for a second. This is pretty amazing if you really think about it. The 49ers they had a camp that had Trey and Brock and Nate Sudfeld, and they went from Trey Lance to Jimmy Garoppolo to Brock Purdy to Josh Johnson, sadly, to Christian McCaffrey. But they went all the way through the year, and there was never any controversy, and the locker room never fractured, never divided, never even came close. And here's why: because when you started with Trey, there was no Jimmy, and there was no doubt Trey was going to win the number one job, and did. So there was nobody in camp going, I don't think I would go with Trey. Nope. Everybody was 100% behind Trey. Then by the time Jimmy hits the field, Trey's done for the year. So it wasn't like I would go with Jimmy over Trey. Nah, I don't know. I'd rather go with Trey over Jimmy. Nope. There was no debate. Trey was done for the year. Here's Jimmy Garoppolo. Nobody was saying, hey, go with Purdy over. At that point, Sudfeld was gone. Go with Purdy over Jimmy. It was Jimmy's job until Jimmy went out and essentially was so seriously injured in that Miami game first week in December that it felt immediately like Jimmy was out for the year, even though we didn't have anything definitive there. It felt like Jimmy was out for the year, and they were going to have to go the rest of the way with Brock. And so it was all like, hey, we're all in on Brock. And he played so well, there wouldn't have been any reason for them to not be all in on Brock. And then Brock goes down, and it's like, obviously, Josh Johnson comes in, and there's, at that point, he was the last man standing. Jimmy wasn't even active. So there was no debate even in that game over which quarterback to play. Isn't that interesting? They went literally with 4 different quarterbacks in the meat and potatoes of their season, and never once for even 1 minute was there, I think you should go with this guy over that guy. It was always clearly defined. It's Trey's team. It's Jimmy's team. It's Brock's team. All right, they're all down. Josh, you're the man. At no point was there ever any other quarterback option available that was debated in social media, Twitter, radio, television, YouTube, nothing. Never 1 minute of debate. Now fast forward to right now. Now we're getting ready to go to training camp.
It's completely the opposite, right?
Brock Purdy isn't healthy right now, but eventually, according to some people, he may be healthy enough to practice and participate in the preseason at some point. I don't know if we'll see it or not. But now we have a situation where literally there are people predicting Sam Darnold, people saying it's Trey Lance has got the best upside, people saying it's Purdy's job to lose. Greg Papa was talking up Brandon Allen the other day. I mean, the last year, no divisiveness at all. The team never split, never was divided. The media never opened, the locker room never opened on a single day where anybody could walk up to a player and say, hey, you know what? Who do you think should be the quarterback based on what you've seen? Or, hey, what do you think of the quarterbacks and how they're playing? It was always clearly defined, and there was no other option. And now we're going into a world of options and and if it's clear cut and Brock Purdy plays here and everybody else plays down here, then it may be just like last year. It's just like Brock's job and nobody's even going to say anything about it. But in reality, if Brock is in any way diminished or if he struggles at all at any point, you're going to have maybe some people arguing for Trey, some arguing for Darnold, some saying Brandon Allen. It's quite a bit different, isn't it?
It's extremely different. I mean, it's really the polar opposite of what it was through all of those different iterations that you mentioned from last season. I do think it is Brock's show. Brock Purdy is the one if he's healthy. And I don't think we're going to see him in a preseason game necessarily. It sounds like the timing of it is leading him to be able to participate toward the end of camp. But really, it seems like his first team all in participation. It seems like it's right now bookmarked for that 2-week or so period between the final preseason game and now the beginning of the regular season on September the 10th. So it feels like, that's where that's at as far as what they've said, at least for the timeline, although everybody's going to be watching him throughout the course of training camp, whether it's throwing on a side field or taking part in drills at some point. But I do think that's one thing I think we have to be clear on, at least I want to be extremely clear on. It's Brock Purdy is the one. He is the number one. He earned it.
In your mind, there is no debate at all. Brock Purdy
coming
is the starter.
in.
Is that what
coming
you're saying?
in, Brock Purdy is the starter to me. No debate. And now it's just a matter of, is he healthy enough? And I'm going to assume that he's going to be healthy enough until proven up. Like, there's no competition, right? If he's not healthy, that's one thing. And then we look at, okay, what's going on with Trey and Darnold. Now we're all going to be watching it play out in real time,
Sure.
But I view that as a separate entity almost. Like, you've got Trey and Darnold going, but Trey's not battling for the one. He is, but only if Purdy is hurt, right? If Purdy's healthy, it's not like Trey's going to do something in training camp where you're like, damn, he's going to be ahead of Purdy now. Like, unless Purdy
preseason.
What
about preseason? What if Trey goes into these preseason games and lights it up? Then what?
I still think it's Purdy's job. Still think it's Purdy's job to start. Yeah. And then, once the regular season games start, then it's all going to be based on performance. And is Brock Purdy what he was over those final 8 games in the 2022 season? Does it look like he's less than 100%? As he starts to play games? Is he not the same quarterback that he was? Do things not function at the level that they did? And then, to me, that's where the door opens. But I think you go into it with Purdy as the one. I think that's the 49ers plan, is to go into it with Purdy as the one. And then you let Trey battle it out. If Trey's awesome in the preseason, terrific. Then you've got an option to go to if Purdy isn't healthy or if Purdy struggles. You're confident at that point that the guy that you spent the number 3 pick in the draft 2 years ago on is good to go. Like, I think that's a great scenario. I remember we talked about this on some shows we did together around the holidays, the fact, and we didn't know Darnold was going to be in the fold at this point, but I think he's a hell of a great option to have as a third option, or as one of 3 options. We don't know if he's going to be necessarily the third option yet, but I said it to you, December, January, I would want to go into next season with Purdy and Trey Lance both on the roster. And I know you made a great point. You said, hey, I don't know if I'm Trey Lance's agent, I'm probably going to want out. I'm going to want to play. I get that from his standpoint. If they had taken that course of action, maybe it still comes to that if he lights it up and doesn't get the job or whatever. But I think from the 49ers standpoint, you're loving what you have in Purdy, and you're hoping that Trey Lance is awesome, because as we've seen, you may need 2 quarterbacks to get through a season. Purdy may not be what he was. If that plays out, you go to Trey, and we may be talking a year from now like, okay, everything's back on track. The Niners have their franchise quarterback, and it's Trey Lance. Like, we don't know, but to still have that option as essentially a backup plan off of Brock Purdy is, I think, a great position for the 49ers to be in. The worst case scenario is if Purdy is hurt or takes dramatic steps back, regresses, isn't the guy that he was, and Trey isn't very good, and then Darnold is the Darnold that he's been to this point in the NFL, and then you don't have 3 quarterbacks. So you could have 2 really good quarterbacks, maybe even 3 really good quarterbacks that you're happy with. Purdy is the headliner, or you could have none. Like both of those scenarios, believe it or not, are on the table for the Niners as well. When you start to juxtapose comparing this situation to what last year's situation was.
And what if Brandon Allen plays well?
Yeah,
then what? I mean, would they consider moving any quarterback? Would Brandon Allen? Is there nothing that Brandon Allen can do to make the roster? What if he plays well in the preseason and looks good in camp? Will they trade Sam Darnold? Would they trade Trey Lance? Would they? I mean, the one thing about Brandon Allen, he was the backup to Joe Burrow this last year, and there's some moxie there. I'll say this: I've watched Brandon Allen tape going back to Arkansas. Not the biggest guy, but man, he's got a little bit of moxie. He's got a little bit of juice. I mean, if you told me that he was going to outperform some quarterback this summer and not be the worst quarterback in the preseason, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be like, no way, no how, no chance. I think it's viable. I think it's possible that he could play really, really well. And then what's the scenario?